Welcome back, toy fans and DC toy fans, to another edition of the DCU Classic Director's Commentary with me, Scott, ToyGuru Neitlich. I was the brand manager for a good chunk of the line, and we're going wave by wave. But before we jump into Wave 6, a quick plug. We are still running the charity for children affected by AIDS, which is Mattel's corporate charity. The link is in the description, and you can see a video in the tag here. Some really rare and unreleased DC items are still available. Quite a few have sold, but there's a few still available. And if you'd like to add these to your collection and make an awesome donation to charity, you can do so today. All right, with the plug behind us, let's jump into the show. DCU Classics Wave 6. That's today's video and the name of the game. Pretty cool wave, actually. A lot of heavy hitters, and that's not just a Calabac joke because he's big and, I don't know, I wouldn't call him fat. I would call him, broad. But, come on. This wave's got two more versions of Superman that you don't get, heavy hitter than that. And, it's got probably more A-list characters in this wave than I think we did in any previous wave or almost any wave afterwards. You had, Captain Marvel and Hawkman. Pretty amazing wave. And like all of the previous videos, we're going to go figure by figure and talk about each character, how we did them, and why they were, well, not why they were chosen, but, how they got to be toys. I was a big fan of Captain Marvel, by the way. Getting to work on a Captain Marvel figure was just really amazing because I love Captain Marvel, the original Captain Marvel before he became Shazam and all that jazz, the Billy Batson version that from the 40s. But that's not important right now. Well, it is important, but not as important as Killer Moth, right? I mean, that was probably the most outrageous Batman villain we'd done to date, and the fact that we still had Batman villains to do was pretty cool. Hawkman, as I said, and he was our first figure to use the bigger buck, the sort of, because he's buffer than Batman and Superman. So we got to tool up a new buck, and that was great because every time we get to tool a new buck, that's just more, no pun intended, more tools in our tool chest to have to make even more characters. So it's always great when a character provides the raw elements for that. And Superman, of course, back in his 90s apparel. Everyone remember what Superman looked like in the 90s? I mean, pretty much the exact same suit with the, red cape and the blue spandex, but he kind of had a different haircut. He was, sporting the mullet, right? Everyone remembers the mullet and how cool that was. Everyone was way cooler when they had a mullet, even Superman. And we did Superman with his mullet in two different outfits. We had his blue outfit, and we also did him in his black outfit, which he wore in the Reign of the Superman, when they were taking down Cyborg Superman and Mongol, and that whole thing where Coast City explodes. But that's a Green Lantern story for another time. Speaking of another time, well, that was a terrible transition. I don't even know where I got that one from. Mr. Miracle, another Kirby figure. Huge fan of the fourth world. Mr. Miracle came with a bunch of cool stuff. Not all the contraptions you see here, but still an amazing character. And of course, we also did his the variant, I guess, of you could say of him, the Dr. Impossible, which was the not the evil version of Mr. Miracle, but it was a repaint. And yes, don't call him Mr. Impossible. He is Dr. Impossible. And then a Build-A-Figure was Calabac for this wave, and there's some really interesting stories, actually, especially about his accessory, his club. We'll get into that, right now, as we talk about DCU Classics Wave 6. With all of the characters introduced, let's go figure by figure, per our usual, and talk about them. So Captain Marvel, or Shazam, I know. Huge fan of Captain Marvel myself, Shazam, whatever you want to call him. And the original goal was really to do the whole family. We wanted to eventually be able to complete the Marvel family in DCU Classics. It was just kind of a personal goal Bill Beneke and I had, and we would talk about it all the time, about how we could do that. And obviously, as I said, he was now the Captain Marvel was now going to be known as Shazam, both legally and on package. And now that he's in a movie, I think he's pretty much kind of Shazam in popular culture. But back even, 10, 15 years ago when the DCU Classics line came out, he was still kind of known as Captain Marvel to a lot of people. But, I guess Carol Danvers has stolen that at this point. And we did manage to get to Captain Marvel Jr., Freddy, who came out in the Signature series at the tail end of the line on Matty Collector. And we got to Mary, who was in a later wave. We did her both red and white. Never got to Hoppy, though. And we actually really tried to do Hoppy. Bill and I, we wanted to do him as a Comic-Con exclusive, but the tooling was just way too intense. There was no way to do him without fully tooling him. But we did do a Comic-Con exclusive of New 52 Shazam, if that counts for anything. So there were, other versions of him that we got to in time. But, never really completed the family. That was kind of, a bridge too far. It would have been cool, though, because there's not too many characters that have, like, an entire family. All right, transitioning to a character without a family and who has very few toys, Killer Moth. There's not many times Killer Moth has been made into an action figure. And it was really exciting that we were going to get the opportunity to do this. Because, well, one, he's a very, toyetic character. He looks very much like a toy. He's very colorful. He's got wings. He's got antennae. He obviously looks like an insect. And eventually he mutates into a giant insect called Sharaxus, and he was actually supposed to be the character here. The Four Horsemen actually sculpted Sharaxus, but the sculpt was huge, and there was no way to do it as a regular figure. It looked amazing. The Horsemen did exactly what was asked for, but at the end of the day, the cost to do Sharaxus was just too much. So unfortunately, Sharaxus wound up on the cutting room floor, and man, we sat on that sculpt, that amazing sculpt from the Horsemen for years, trying to figure out a way to release it, but it was a fully tooled figure, and it was tough. It was just a really tough way to fit that into the line. Because actually the original idea was Killer Moth was going to be the chase figure, with Sharaxus being the main figure, because honestly we kind of thought fans were going to think Killer Moth was a little too silly, but he actually turned out to be incredibly popular. So, hey, spilled milk sometimes works. All right, from a figure that got changed in line to one that did not was our Superman of the wave. We always had a Superman in each wave. And we were again going to focus on the very popular Reign of the Superman line from the 90s and do Black Suit Superman. So he was actually intended to be the main Superman figure that we were going to do because, he looked at least different versus, just giving him the mullet haircut on the existing body was, he looked closer to regular. But we ended up doing them, I think, as a 50-50 variant because we knew fans were going to want both. And it was cool because since, one had a cape, one didn't, one had armbands, one had a belt. So aside from the color change, they actually did look like different figures, which was cool. All right, continuing with our variants, Mr. Miracle, who was an original Superpowers figure. We kind of got to check this one off, too. Our goal in the long run was also to do all the Superpowers figures, much like the Shazam figure. But with Superpowers, we got closer to the goal. And again, like Killer Moth, Mr. Miracle was a very toyetic figure, very bright colors, really cool cape, yellows, reds. He's got a mask, which makes him very aspirational, and he's a master of escape, which that's very aspirational for kids. Not that, this line was entirely aimed at kids, but it's always great to get the kid sales on top of Collector. And he came with the awesome armbands, to escape from, and the foot pads, and he was really cool. We did get to Big Barda. We did not get to Oberon, which I wish we had. This was a DC Direct Oberon. He would have been cool. And the variant of him, as I mentioned, was Dr. Impossible. I mentioned also in another video about how I find variants, especially variants in a collector line, to be much stronger when the variant makes the character into a different character versus something like in the DC Superheroes line, which was more kid-aimed, where you had like Doomsday, and then you had Orange Doomsday. That was kind of even though there was some precedent for that, it was more of a kid redeco. With this, because we were able to do a redeco to make him into a different character, that was always a stronger variant in my mind versus just, putting different paint on a character. And speaking of which, what is it with the purple characters and, them being evil or impossible? I don't know. There's something about purple that it's always about being impossible. Like, it's impossible to stop the grimace. All right. Well, he was cool. And I think he actually wound up looking even cooler than Mr. Miracle. But that's for fans to decide. Next up, we had our Thanagarian warrior, Hawkman himself. And as I mentioned in the intro of the video, he provided a brand new buck. He provided the larger male buck, not like the Hulk buck or the Kilowog buck, but the slightly bigger than Batman buck, I guess you could say. And that was great because it was going to allow us to do other characters that needed to be slightly bigger than Batman. You can see here a comparison shot. He's definitely a little bit bigger than Batman. Not huge, but at least, we were trying to go for the best possible scale. And yes, I know that there are times with Lobo and others where we failed that. He had wings. He had new wings, which, oh my gosh, I remember the Horseman said, we never want to sculpt wings again because they had to do so many feathers and the detail on every single one. I just remember Eric saying, please don't make us sculpt wings again. This was like quite a project. So we reused his wings on basically every winged character that we did, just so they wouldn't have to sculpt wings again, because it was a lot of work sculpting those wings. They did an awesome job. And speaking of awesome jobs, hey, there's a transition for you. Calabac, our Build-A-Figure. So this one, I was actually surprised that they went with the green outfit. I thought we were going to get the brown outfit. I don't know if that was a design to discuss that with them or it was just something in my mind. We eventually got to the brown outfit. We did the brown outfit at the very tail end of the line. But they went with green, which I think actually was a smarter decision because he pops more in green. The brown tends to fade into the background, fade into shelves. But, at the end, you could get both. We eventually did do both. But they did an awesome job, and I actually applaud the green one. I think that if we went out with brown first, we would have never done green. So it's kind of good that we did green first. In fact, this is actually kind of one of my toy philosophies, or my rules, is that you really should always release kind of the less demanded color variant first, because if you do the more demanded one first, you may never get to the less one. But if you do the less one first, you're pretty much guaranteed to get to the more one. I know, it's kind of a weird math formula, but it tends to work. One last thing on Calabac is his weapon, his accessory, his club. So originally his club was supposed to be more than just a club, but we couldn't afford the tooling. We had to cut some of it. And that extra piece of the club wound up being the gun for the Parademon in a later wave. So you can actually take part of the Parademon's gun and attach it to Calabac's club to see how the Horseman originally envisioned it and how big his club was originally supposed to be. Pretty neat. That's Calabac's club for you. Wouldn't that be a cool place to hang out?